Going live. We're going to hold potentially negative stuff. I've got a moderator, and that's my partner Tati. So I'm experimenting with going live with a moderator. I've put a little delay on it. Right? Okay. So we will get started. Thank you. So I am about to do the daily routine, which is a meditation on the Buddha, and then the short version of the Ashtanga Yoga primary series, and then the martial arts body weight workout. And I do this pretty much every day. I try to do it every day. I'm going to play a short Dharma talk by the Tibetan Buddhist nuns whose work I study. I follow their tradition, their lineage of martial arts, or I'm sorry, Buddhist meditation. And I like their politics. I have a whole playlist here called Political Buddhism on my channel. So if you look that up, you can find it and listen to some really nice Dharma talks. And I see Tati. I see you there commenting. So Tati's doing the moderation for this because we're having a live chat here. And you can see I'm doing a fundraiser to help supplement the bills because I was deactivated on DoorDash and Uber Eats. They're doing a mass deactivation right now. So I got deactivated and their excuse was that it was a background check. And they did the same background check when I got onto the platforms. Hi, Ancient. But I haven't had any problems before with the apps. I haven't had any new criminal record. I had one thing, I was a political prisoner according to the ACLU and the Cato Institute. They handled my appeals because it was a freedom of speech thing. I made a Facebook post against Donald Trump, and that's what it amounts to, is that because I spoke up and organized against Donald Trump, the FBI SWAT team kicked my door down, took me straight to prison, put me in solitary confinement pre-trial, and then put a Nazi in my cell to attack me, and I ended up spending an entire year in solitary confinement. Then I was sentenced to federal prison. I did 2.5 years altogether, and then I got out, and I'm still on probation. So I started doing DoorDash and Uber Eats when I got out of prison. I have 3 electric bikes that I rotate, and as of yesterday, both apps deactivated me based on the background check, which they did 3 times already, and on this 3rd background check, they decided to deactivate me. So I'm currently unemployed. I was out holding a Hungry Veteran sign on the corner today on Valentine's Day instead of being able to take my partner, Tati, out on a date. So I'm live streaming my daily routine and asking for help with the bills so that I can pay rent. We're about to do a meditation on the Buddha, and then we're going to do the short version of the Ashtanga Yoga primary series, and then we're going to do a short martial arts body weight workout which is in the format of a high-intensity interval training. So there will be 30 seconds of each exercise, and there will be 4 types of exercises. We're going to do a full body exercise, then legs, then upper body, then core. And each one will be repeated over and over again throughout the practice. Then we're going to do kickboxing, and then kicks, then boxing, and then high knees or head movement for the core, right? So that's the basic format for what we're doing here. So I'm going to clean up the room, and I'm going to play a short Dharma talk.
Happy summer solstice. Today's June 21st, and it's the summer solstice, which means we have 16 hours of daylight, which is pretty nice. Sunrise is at 5 a.m. and sets at 9 p.m., which is really nice to have our longest day of the year. And today I wanted to talk about resiliency in the terms of Dharma practice and in terms of climate change. On Friday, or last Saturday, I had the opportunity to go to a little local talk on climate change by an atmospheric scientist who had worked for the Air Force for her career. And she had a lot of different facts about climate change. I mean, she was kind of talking to the people who already agreed with climate change, but it was, again, just a very good reminder to see our reality of what's happening, and again, to be reminded of how vital it is that we continue to act and to not get depressed or discouraged or daunted by it, because it is quite daunting, but we have to keep acting. We can't just ignore it. It's interesting, she shared several little facts that I'll just give a couple, but 72% of Americans actually believe in climate change, that we recognize that it's happening. And so it's not a question of whether it's happening or not, but everybody sees it. We just need to actually keep acting on it. And the last 10 hottest years ever recorded in history have been since 2010. And the most severe storms, costing over $1 billion, have also happened within the last 20 years. And I mean, it would probably be astounding to add up the numbers of how much the damage costs from those storms caused by climate change, and think, if we had taken that money and used it to invest in technology and things to prevent the storms from happening, we would have been a lot more farther along in actually addressing this problem, rather than waiting for things to get bad and then reacting.
Oh my.
Another fact, that she had this chart showing CO2 levels, and for the past 800,000 years, the CO2 level has been pretty steady at 300 parts per million, kind of a fairly stable line, little bumps and things. But in 1950, that line just started going up so sharply. And scientists many times said that there's a tipping point at 360 parts per million, and that's when we'll start seeing the ice sheets melting and ocean levels rising dramatically. And right now we're at 400. We've already passed that point, and it's continuing to go up, and scientists are seeing the currents slowing down, which means some parts of Europe are actually going to get colder. And it's yeah. She showed one picture of the icebergs melting, or the ice sheets melting, and it's not just a drip, it's waterfalls all over the place. And she said, with climate change, it's not just the warming temperatures, which we're already seeing, but drought is going to be the #1 problem. Widespread drought, which means widespread famine, and a lot of repercussions from that. So at the end of the talk, I was slightly disappointed because it was all these depressing facts that I already knew about, and I was waiting for that golden answer of what can we do, and that didn't really happen. It was kind of like things I've been hearing since I was a kid: recycle and turn off the lights and all these little things. So I was slightly frustrated at the end of the talk, but the more I thought about it, I was like, but that does matter. I mean, it's the ripple effect. If each one of us actually did that, it would have a big impact. Ever since I was a kid, I've been wanting to figure out how to really help and to not cause harm. And when I decided to be a wildlife biologist, and some of my first jobs were actually killing animals. My first job at Priest Lake was killing fish, introduced species of fish that was outcompeting other fish species. And so we were killing them to try to recover this threatened fish species. And fortunately, 16 years ago, I came to Young Adult Week and was talking to Venerable Shodron and asked, so is killing these fish that we're trying to remove actually harmful, even though I'm trying to help these other species? And she clearly said, yes, any kind of killing is not helpful. So that's still a question that I continue to reflect on. It's like how to truly help and how to not cause harm. I mean, that's a huge reason of why I ordained, because what I was trying to do, help save the world with wildlife and the environment, wasn't working. One simple phrase that it's kind of, I think we've all heard it, can be easy to dismiss, but it's also so true. It's think global, act local. And it's, again, I mean, that's, in a way, that's also our Buddhist worldview, is think big, very big, and then take responsibility for the actions that are happening right in this moment. That each little thing does matter. So again, if we all conserved water, if we all conserved electricity and fuel, those actions add up. In looking at my mind, I've seen that I so deeply want things to just be easy and pleasant, for things to be convenient. And I mean, that's definitely our American lifestyle, is we're kind of taught that things should be easy and convenient. And that's a huge reason why we're one of the largest contributors of CO2. The US we only represent 5% of the world's population, but we produce 25% of the CO2. And yeah, so we have a big part. We might think we're just little fish in the sea, but we make a lot of CO2, each person. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with our public transportation, our lack of public transportation, and that kind of stubborn independence of doing what I want when I want it and getting what I want when I want it. I mean, Amazon has certainly not helped. You just click a button online, buy whatever you want, and it would be so interesting to find out the carbon cost of buying a flaming pig lighter from Amazon, sorry, and seeing, how much was that actual carbon footprint. It's so easy to do, and we do it all the time, but we don't realize the impact of that, of our actions. And thinking about climate change, I was thinking about how it completely connects with the 4 characteristics of karma. Karma is definite. Creating CO2 warms the earth. Karma expands, that it's a ripple effect. That little bit of CO2 released has massive repercussions as far as, changing our weather patterns and instability across the world. But it also has positive repercussions, that if we act, one person can make a difference. Think of Greta Thunberg, for example. One person, through her actions of speaking up, has made a huge difference. Third characteristic of karma is that if you don't create the cause, then you don't get the result. And so if we don't act, it's only going to get worse. Ignoring it doesn't really stop it. Continuing to feed the doubt that we have. I think it's really convenient to be like, well, I don't know if this actually helps or if it hurts, and I heard this conflicting information. That's kind of an excuse for our laziness to just not do anything. If you actually look online, there's a lot of really good, clear, factual information about what's happening and what helps. And number 4 is that the action is not lost, that the CO2 is not going to disappear, but that each action really does matter. For example, just flying 1 mile in an airplane emits 53 pounds of CO2, and that there's 100,000 flights on average per day in the US. So if you think about that ripple effect, each time we're flying emits a lot of CO2. Each gallon, on average, each gallon of gas produces about 20 pounds of CO2. And with 200 million licensed drivers in the US, that also adds up. But and even though we have these systems in place that seem like, well, I have to be able to drive to get groceries and we have to be able to fly, we can also make actions to correct kind of our harm that we're causing. That there's really good organizations that you can kind of invest money in to capture carbon, especially with landfills. They're able to capture all the methane and CO2 that's released just from the breakdown process of landfills. So we can help investing in different technologies that can help offset the carbon. There's one company called TerraPass that has just projects all over the world that they're connecting with, and it's really easy to calculate how much CO2 you're producing and then be able to make an offering to try to offset that. So there are a lot of ways we can help. I mean, it can be quite daunting, but climate change is daunting, but so is samsara. I mean, that's where we're at. So Buddha taught cause and effect, but he also taught the end of dukkha. And a huge part of that is our ethical conduct. It's not causing that harm. And one of the ways that the Buddha first started teaching was in establishing precepts, that we weren't really good at not causing harm on our own. That having the precepts and knowing what is clearly harmful and what is clearly helpful is a huge part of what the Buddha taught. And so I really think actually having some of our restraints of having carbon taxes and penalties for the harm that we're causing is also incredibly important. That we have to actually pay the true cost of what our actions are. Because we know the causes for climate change, and we have to just reduce the fossil fuel. Electric cars aren't perfect, but they produce half the amount of CO2 that regular cars do. So we have to continue to use our wisdom and intelligence to really find the truth of things. And in Dharma practice, I mean, the self-centered thought is our number one enemy. And we can also see that that's the same with addressing climate change, that it's the laziness and self-centeredness and greed that is the cause. And so in both aspects, we can work on addressing that and seeing that we are responsible for our own actions. And also, I mean, the Buddha had his integrity and wisdom and the power of role models showing us the path that it is possible makes a huge difference. So if each one of us holds that integrity and steps up and holds an awareness of our actions and is that model, that has a ripple effect in other people seeing that as well. There's ecosystem resiliency, which is a term of just kind of showing the balance of how the ecosystem kind of balances itself out and restores itself based on different qualities and factors. And a huge part of that is the diversity in nature. And we can see that also in our Dharma practice, that the importance of diversity, that having diversity of different traditions working with each other, diversity in our practices, and diversity in the teachings is really important in understanding and navigating different things that arise. The definition of resiliency is the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties. And that's what we're doing in our Dharma practice, is working with our minds to overcome any difficulties. And that's what we can do for also addressing climate change, is having that creativity and diversity and determination to get out of samsara and to end climate change, so that we can keep thinking bigger and working one step at a time. We're doing our best to not cause harm and to be of benefit and to truly be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings.
So that was a short Dharma talk just to listen to while we got the room ready for meditation. Now we're going to listen to and practice this Tibetan Buddhist meditation on the Buddha, which basically involves using your imagination, right? Sitting here and visualizing these things. And again, just to reiterate, I try to do this live stream every day, but right now, today, I'm asking people to donate to these links in the comments because DoorDash and Uber Eats are doing mass deactivations, and I got caught up in that. So DoorDash and Uber Eats deactivated me, um, and so I'm looking for a new job. But in the meantime, while I'm rage applying down the street with a stack of resumes, I'm also going out on the corner and begging to try to put together the money for the rent, which is due in 2 weeks. So we've got about half the rent together, but then we have to pay for other utility bills and things like that. So any help would be appreciated. And on that note, we'll jump right into the meditation on the Buddha. After that, we're going to do the short version of the Ashtanga Yoga Primary Series, and then we will do a 32 to 36 minute body weight workout with martial arts exercises. That's going to be a high intensity interval training format, so it'll be full body exercise, legs, upper body, then core, about 25 seconds each exercise over and over. And we're going to alternate from doing calisthenics like full body burpee, squat, push up, sit up, to technique where we'll do kickboxing, kicking, boxing, and high knees or head movement for the core, and then back to the calisthenics, alternating over and over. But right now we'll begin the meditation.
We do the practices with this aspiration to be a benefit to beings, not to harm them, to benefit them. And in our understanding, the best benefit is to actually, for beings to be liberated from cyclic existence. And we aim to become Buddhas in order to help beings to be free in this way. So generate those thoughts in your own way. So Vinamachoda has laid out this sadhana for us, helping us to generate these various mind states. And she starts by having us think about all of our potential, all the kind of positive qualities that we can develop. Infinite love, compassion, wisdom, skillful means. So imagine what it would feel like to be those qualities. Just let yourself be love, be wisdom, try to feel the expansiveness of peace in your heart, the wisdom that it takes to have this kind heart, to be unencumbered in any way, vast and expansive. Can take in everything that's happening in this world, reaching out to every being, human and otherwise, to benefit each one. So now imagine that these qualities of love, compassion, wisdom, skillful means appear in front of you in the form of Shakyamuni Buddha. So imagine this Buddha in front of you, in the space in front of you made of radiant, transparent light. He's sitting on a throne, above which is an open lotus flower, and cushions of the sun and moon discs. This entire visualization is made of radiant, transparent light, but you're imagining a living being with a light body. So you feel yourself in the presence of the Buddha. But Buddha's body is golden in color. He wears the robes of a monastic. His right hand, with the palm down, rests on his right knee. And the earth touching mudra. And his left hand is in his lap, holding a bowl of nectar. And this nectar is the medicine to cure our afflictions and all of our hindrances. And the Buddha's face is very beautiful. You can look at the Buddha's eyes. He's smiling, his eyes are smiling. He's looking at you with total acceptance. And as he looks at you, he's also encompassing all sentient beings. The Buddha's eyes are very peaceful, long and narrow. His lips are red and his earlobes are long. Imagine rays of light radiating from every pore of the Buddha's body. This golden light going out to all the parts of the universe, touching beings, carrying miniature Buddhas to help beings. And as they complete their work, they dissolve back into the Buddha. The Buddha is surrounded by the entire lineage of spiritual teachers, all the meditational deities, innumerable other Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Arhats, Dakas, Dakinis, Dharma protectors. And at the side, near each spiritual mentor, is an elegant table. And on it are Dharma books. And the sounds of the Dharma fill the air. And they're all so happy that we're here doing this together. Imagine their minds just blissful and peaceful, gazing at all sentient beings. So you imagine that actually you were surrounded by all sentient beings in human form. Your mother of this life is on your left. Your father of this life is on your right. Any people you have difficulty with, you imagine in front of you, facing the Buddha, keeping them there for protection. Family and friends are nearby. Countless strangers fill the space around you. And all of us are looking to the Buddha for guidance. So first we need to cultivate a sense of refuge. So we think of all the dangers of cyclic existence. Just think about how things are not secure. We run into dissatisfaction often, dukkha often. And people, all the beings around us, all the sentient beings around us, are also in the same boat, floundering in cyclic existence. And many of them have not met any kind of teachings that will help them out of this quagmire. So we generate compassion. And now think of the wonderful qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and generate this sense of confidence in them, in their ability to guide you out of all of these recurring problems. take refuge, we need to cause this kind of concern, this kind of alarm, fear type, and also this confidence and faith and the compassion. So it is possible, on the basis of your present life and mind, to free yourself from all of these undesirable experiences. So resolve to explore that possibility to the fullest. Feel great trust and confidence in the three jewels, and open your heart to rely upon them to guide you and others from all of these difficulties of cyclic existence and bring us to the peace, liberation, and full awakening. So as we do these refuge verses, starting here, now we're on the top of page 21, we'll be taking refuge in the Buddha, and we imagine actually leading all of the sentient beings around us and going for refuge. And we visualize white, radiant light flowing from all of the Buddhas, the spiritual mentors, the Bodhisattvas, all of these holy beings flowing into us and all the beings around us. And this light completely purifies all of our destructive karmic imprints and afflictions. And it also brings all the realizations of the path. So put your hands in prayer position. Namo Guruvya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, 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 Namo Guruvya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. feel that you've come under the protection of the three jewels. And now we turn our thoughts to others and think about how much we depend on other beings for everything that we have, everything we know, everything we use, everything we enjoy. Our food, clothing, resources of every kind. These come due to the efforts of others. Our knowledge, talents, good qualities, these too are developed due to the kindness of others. And our ability to practice the Dharma certainly depends on others who brought the teachings to us over the millennia by generating realizations in their mind and teaching. So this is a very great kindness, all of these things we want to bring to mind. Our innermost wish is to be free from suffering. And this is the case for everyone else as well. We want to be happy, and all beings want to be happy. And like us, they encounter many difficulties, problems, sufferings. And usually, actually, their difficulties are more so than our own. Not always, but often. And when we examine our capacity to help beings, we find that we're actually quite limited. And we know from our practice that if we can reduce our anger, our attachment, our ignorance, our various faults, and if we can increase all of our good qualities, we're really going to be in a position to benefit beings. Imagine if we had just this generous heart that gives so easily, takes delight in giving, the kind of ethics that doesn't harm, has that just ingrained fortitude, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom. We'll be in excellent position to help beings by having our good qualities developed. And if we develop them fully, like a Buddha does, then we'll be able to be of the greatest benefit to beings. So we generate this altruistic intention in order to be able to benefit beings most effectively. So as we take refuge and generate bodhicitta, imagine that light is flowing into you from all of these Buddhas and holy beings. And it's flowing into you and all the sentient beings around you. So we're on the top of page 22. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. So imagine the Buddha is so pleased with your altruistic intention. And a replica emerges from the Buddha, comes to the crown of your head, melts into golden light, flows into you. Feel that you and the Buddha have become inseparable. close to the Buddha, and allow your mind to be transformed and inspired. Let go of all conceptions you have about yourself. Let go of any self-denigrating thoughts. Let go of the concept of inherent existence and meditate on emptiness. As your heart appears a small Buddha made of light. He radiates the light of wisdom and compassion in all directions throughout the entire universe. And this light transforms all sentient beings into Buddhas and all environments into pure lands, which are places where all the circumstances are conducive to practicing the Dharma and generating realizations. So imagine this. You've transformed all sentient beings into Buddhas and all environments into pure lands. In your imagination, well, why hasn't this become a reality? We sentient beings have bias, prejudice, we lack love, compassion, and joy. So now we want to wish ourselves and others to have all of these qualities. So we contemplate the four immeasurables. We do this to reinforce our own felt experience of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity for everyone. Friends, strangers, enemies, relatives, people you don't like, people you don't trust, anyone, everyone. So as we say those four immeasurables, you want to listen to yourself say the words and contemplate as you recite. We'll pause between each of the four. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. So, in order to achieve what we've just been aspiring towards, we need to purify our negativities, and we need a lot of merit. We need to abandon things and adopt things. So when we do the 7-limb prayer, this encompasses all this abandoning and adopting of things. So we'll pause after each line. And you want to put your hands in the prayer position for this. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. So imagine yourself and all the beings, the sentient beings around you, making prostrations to all the holy beings in front of you in the field of merit, repeatedly prostrating. And present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed, So imagine offering everything beautiful to the Buddha and all the holy beings. You can fill the sky with offerings, make it very lovely and beautiful. You can think of flowers and fields and just everything that you love. Offer to all the holy beings. You can do this repeatedly. I confess all my destructive actions accumulated since beginning this time. So now we do like a glance meditation of the four permanent powers. So for this, bring to mind something that you wish to purify, some fault or mistake. Bring it clearly to mind and generate regret for that. And then the other permanent powers are taking refuge in generating bodhicitta, which we're doing in the practice. The practice itself will be the remedial action, but make a determination not to do this action again. And rejoice in the virtues of all holy and ordinary beings. So think of common sentient beings like ourselves, the holy beings, and delight and take, rejoice in all of the virtue created by any kind of being. Let go of any jealousy, envy, and just rejoice in the goodness of the world. Use your own life experience. Think of things, people that you want to rejoice. And the next verse. Please remain until cyclic existence ends. So now we offer a double dorje. This symbolizes long life. And we offer this to the holy beings. We do this requesting them to live long, to always be a part of our life. And you can do this multiple times in your imagination. And then the next verse. And turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. So again, make this offering. You're offering with both hands this beautiful 1,000-spoke Dharma wheel, golden in color. Offering this to the teachers and the Buddhas to guide you and to continue to teach the Dharma. And then the seventh one. I dedicate all the virtues of myself and others to the Great Awakening. So now we steer these limbs toward full awakening for ourselves and all beings. And now we'll offer the mandala. Here we imagine everything beautiful in the universe, offering it to all the holy beings with the wish that they will continue to teach and guide us and that we can generate realizations in our mind. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn mounts may room for land, sun, and moon. Imagined as a Buddha land and offer to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. The objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, friends, enemies, and strangers, my body, wealth, and enjoyments, I offer these without any sense of loss. Please accept them with pleasure and inspire me and others to be free from the three poisonous attitudes. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniriyatayami. So imagine all the holy beings are just delighted and they receive your offerings. And the offerings melt into light and dissolve into them. And these all absorb into the Buddha's heart. And then immediately he radiates light back to you, filling your body and mind. And this light inspires you to accomplish the path to full awakening. So in order to progress along the path, we need to develop realizations. And in order to do this, we need the inspiration of the lineage of spiritual mentors, especially your principal teacher or your root guru, who is the one who has touched your heart deeply. If you don't have a specific teacher, just think about Shakyamuni Buddha. Maybe you have a connection in your mind with His holiness. And we make this request on page 25. Glorious and precious root guru, sit upon the lotus and moon seat on my crown, guiding me with your great kindness. Bestow upon me the attainments of your body, speech, and mind. And so then, at this point, you imagine that a replica of your teacher in the aspect of the Buddha emerges from the Buddha in front of you. And it comes to sit on a lotus and moon disc on the crown of your head, facing the same direction as you. So then this Buddha on the crown of your head is going to act as an advocate for you to request inspiration from the entire field of merit as we continue with the request. And we're doing the long one on page 26. Buddha, unequal teacher and guide, venerable protector Maitreya, successor, superior Sangha prophesied by Buddha, to you three Buddhas and Bodhisattvas I make request. Buddha, head of the Shakya clan, the foremost guide, peerless in expounding emptiness, Manjushri, embodiment of the Buddha's complete wisdom, exalted Nagarjuna, best of the superiors who sees the profound meaning, to you three crowning jewels of clear exposition I make request. Atisha, upholder of this great vehicle, who sees the profundity of dependent arising, Drone Rinpoche, elucidator of this good path, to these two ornaments of the world I make request. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of Advaita's compassion, Manjushri, masteress flawless wisdom, Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the snowy land sages, Losangrappa, I make request at your feet. Holder of the white lotus, embodiment of all the conqueror's compassion, guide benefiting migrating beings in the land of snow mountains and beyond. Sole deity and refuge, Tenzin Gyatso, at your feet I make request. The eyes through whom the vast scriptures are seen, supreme doors for the fortunate who would cross over to spiritual freedom, illuminators whose wise means vibrate with compassion. To the entire line of spiritual mentors I make request. So imagine all of the figures in the field of merit melting into light and dissolving into you. Into the central figure of the Buddha in front of you. All of the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the Arhats, Dakas, the Kimis, Dharma protectors, all of these beings melt into light and dissolve into the central figure of Shakyamuni Buddha. And now Shakyamuni Buddha embodies the three jewels. And this Buddha absorbs into the Buddha on the crown of your head. And then as we recite the Buddha's mantra, try to let your mind be very open and receptive. Imagine this white light flowing into you from the Buddha on the crown of your head. It purifies all your negativities, all your obscurations, and it generates within you the realizations of the stages of the path. So we'll recite the Buddha's mantra together. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. Soha. Tayata Om Mune Mune Mahamune 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 Soha. Now, re-establish the visualization of Shakyamuni Buddha above the crown of your head, made of golden, transparent, radiant light, a living being. And this Buddha melts into light and dissolves into you. Your body, speech, and mind become inseparable from those of the Buddha. And then we'll make the dedication prayers, starting on the page that we're on in the sadhana, which is 27. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline. grace forevermore.
So this has been the Tibetan Buddhist meditation on the Buddha, led by the Tibetan Buddhist nuns at the Shravasti Abbey in Washington State. And I like them because I agree with their political views and their political statements. So now I'm debating about whether to continue what we were listening to yesterday. But I'm going to put on some more stuff to listen to while we do the yoga. And it's either going to be music with philosophy, or it's going to be some kind of Alan Watts talk, but we shall see.
Have you ever encountered anyone? Do you believe there's anybody out there that doesn't play power games, manipulation, have shadows, have darkness?
No, I don't. But so in my war book, I read the biography of Mahatma Gandhi, one of the salient figures in history, right? And I realized that Mahatma Gandhi was actually a brilliant strategist. Now, I'm not saying his use of nonviolence and civil disobedience didn't come from the heart. He didn't mean it. He didn't actually believe in the peaceful way that he did. He was very sincere, but he was very strategic about it. And he planned a campaign, several campaigns like the Salt March in the 20s, where he knew, for instance, that the English public was very liberal-minded. They had this ideal of themselves as being they weren't colonialists, they weren't imperialists, they were doing the best for the world. And he deliberately had these marches where he knew that they would be reading in their newspaper and seeing photographs of Indian people being beaten up by Englishmen and their Indian officers on the streets of wherever. It would have a terrible impact on the public. He thought in terms of strategy. Okay, so there's Gandhi. Then there's Martin Luther King, who's somebody I wrote about a lot in The Laws of Human Nature. Another great icon whom I admire, who actually was inspired by Gandhi and had campaigns of civil disobedience. And there was a campaign, I believe it was in Montgomery or Selma, I can't remember which one, where he was getting fed up. They weren't getting very far. The civil rights movement, they were reaching a stalemate, and he was getting very frustrated. And an advisor came to him and said, look, we're going to have this massive march, and I can get a lot of elementary school and junior high school students to be on this march because they believe in you and they're very fervent. And I think it would be great. And his advisors go, God, you can't do that. You can't put 13-year-olds at risk. And Martin Luther King thought about it very deeply. He said, no, we're going to go ahead and do it. Because, damn it, I want the American public sitting in there all fat and watching their televisions to see these brutal, Bull Connor, the police chief then. I want to see these children being water hosed and beaten, and it's going to have an incredible impact. He was being strategic, and his advisors were shocked by it, but it ended up proving to be one of the most pivotal, important moments in the civil rights movement. So here you have Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King was a flawed individual, as we know, right? He had a private life that wasn't exactly the same as his public life. I don't judge him for that because he was a brilliant man, and I admire him. I love him deeply. Reading his biography made me even admire him even more, seeing that he had a human, flawed side to him. But these are icons that we set up, and they reveal what I'm talking about in human nature. You can't escape it.
So, I'm going to open the yoga with the Ashtanga Yoga opening mantra. And that is basically meaning in Sanskrit, thank you to the teachers of the past, present, and future who brought this practice to us from the meditators in the jungle, because this practice helps to alleviate the suffering of existence. And while we practice, I'm going to be playing more videos like the one we just listened to, because it focuses on things like how you can use nonviolent civil disobedience strategically in real life when you need to, right? And I'm going to try to find that from the book. That he just quoted. Let's see if I can find it real quick without wasting a bunch of time.
You have learned, and to be a
Nope, there's no labels on this one.
German
So,
commanders began to repeat one of
I don't
Moltke's
think
favorite stories.
I don't think we'll be able to find it here. So, I'm just going to keep playing these clips about Gandhi that Gandhi and Martin Luther King that Robert Greene talks about. I'm looking for one that's just the right length, because it's going to take about 30 minutes to do this yoga. And I invite you to follow along with me, do your own version of this Ashtanga yoga practice. Here we go, this one looks good. So again, I'm going to open with the mantra, I will close with a mantra, and we will practice this whole thing together. And we're just going to do the postures without all the sun salutations. And again, I just got deactivated on Uber Eats and DoorDash, and I deliver food full time on my electric bikes. So now I am unemployed until I find a new job. So I'm asking if you could please like, share, and subscribe, and donate. And if you can't donate, then share the links that you see in the comments to these different ways that you can help me to pay the bills until I find a new job. I've got about 2 weeks to raise $900, and I think we've raised about $600 so far. So we just need a little bit more to get rent. And then there's like $269 for utilities. And then there's some other bills, and I have to maintain these bikes also. There's some parts at the bike shop, and they're waiting me to bring the bikes in. So I set the goal at $1,000 on GoFundMe. But you could also buy my pamphlet. That was my essays and prison writings from when I was a political prisoner because I was out protesting against Donald Trump. You can Google me. If you Google Dan Baker political prisoner, or if you Google Dan Baker combat footage, you can see what I'm about and where I've been. So I'll shut up now. I'm going to do this mantra. It's weird, it's Sanskrit. A lot of what we just did in the meditation was traditional exercises in Sanskrit and Tibetan chanting. And I believe in the power of repetition and mantra because these vibrations will have a physical effect on you. Whether or not it's spiritual, you will feel nice if you can memorize some mantras and repetitively practice them, even if they're in your native language. So, we'll begin. Vande Gurunam Charanadavinde Sandarshetas Padma Sukhava Bodhe Nirshe Se Jangalikaya Mane Samsara Hala Hala Moha Shantiye Abahu Purushakaram Shankasakrasidarinam Sahasra Shilasam Shaitam Pranamami Patanjalim. Om. On a side note, if I had unlimited money and resources, I would continue to train and compete in martial arts, boxing, kickboxing, MMA, grappling. I would go to EMT paramedic school and I would get my CDL and go to culinary school. Be a very well-rounded person.
Hi everyone. So Dr. Karuna Mantena is a professor of political science at Columbia University, and she's the co-director of the International Conference for the Study of Political Thought. She's the author of Alibi of Empire, Henry Maine and the Ends of Liberal Imperialism, which analyzed the transformation of 19th century British imperial ideology. She specializes in political theory with research interests in the theory and history of empire, South Asian intellectual history, and post-colonial democracy. She holds a PhD in government from Harvard University, and she's currently finishing a book on MK Gandhi and the politics of nonviolence. That's titled Gandhi's Realism, Means and Ends in Politics. So, Professor Mantena, thank you so much for being here today and for presenting your talk. We look forward to learning from you.
Terrific. So thank you all. It's wonderful to be here. So I'll thank Sabrina for the invitation and Aishwarya for the introduction and Mavis and Priyanka for helping with the organization. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but it's great to see everyone. I once taught at Cornell, so I feel a little close to the institution. So I'm just going to jump right into the talk. The title of my talk is Why and How Gandhi Civilized Disobedience. I'm going to start my timer to make sure I don't go too far over. So in recent years, there's been a growing rejection, especially amongst political theorists and philosophers, of the model of civil disobedience that had been consolidated in American legal and political philosophy in the late 1960s and 70s. In the context of its in the aftermath of its mass use in the civil rights movement and anti-war protests, and mounting criticism by conservatives that toleration of such practices encouraged criminality, anarchy, and disrespect for the law. So Rawls's theory, you may know Rawls's theory of civil disobedience, was representative of this wider discussion. And it has been the focus of this mounting criticism. So just a quick summary of Rawls's theory. Rawls's theory emphasized four basic requirements for legitimate civil disobedience or disobedience in a decent society. It had to be, one, public, open, and visible. Secondly, conscientious, civil, or nonviolent in its breach of unjust or immoral law. And it should accept arrest and punishment as a way to show fidelity to the rule of law. And in general, it should be seen as it should be constitutionally bound and appeal to shared ideals, and thus not a revolutionary or its focus should be overthrowing a regime. Contemporary critics argue these requirements are too narrow, that they are too moderate and or liberal, too moralistic or legalistic. In making their case, they often argue and show, and I think they are on solid ground here, that these requirements are either based on mistaken understandings of sort of crucial figures like Thoreau, Gandhi, and King, or more provocatively, that none of these canonical figures would have fit the criteria of a proper civil disobedience. An early skeptical intervention on this ground was made by a philosopher, William Hurd, that Thoreau especially neither used the term civil disobedience nor contemplated or practiced most of the actions that are now loosely associated with civil disobedience. I'll come back to this issue about whether Thoreau ever used the term civil disobedience. But King has been the most important note of contention, since in many ways he was the exemplary figure whose mode of disobedience was what many of these liberal philosophers, including Rawls, were explicitly hoping to rescue from conservative critique. In this endeavor, critics now contend Rawls and others necessarily tamped down on King's more disruptive, provocative, and radical or transformative elements to make it appear safe for liberal constitutionalism. Brandon Terry has made some of these arguments, Aaron Pineda, and at Cornell, of course, Alex Livingstone. So these criticisms, these contemporary criticisms, are often made in the service of a defense of uncivil forms of disobedience, such as some of the more recent forms of environmental, alter globalization, animal rights movements that frequently employ more disruptive confrontational tactics. And they have no strict assumption of nonviolence, and that activists often don't invite legal punishment, they might evade it in various ways. Now, I'm broadly sympathetic to the historical political critique of the liberal theory of civil disobedience. I agree that it's narrowly legalistic in conception, and it does not represent what motivated Thoreau, Gandhi, and King's views or practice. To be short, I think there is something unusual. There's something strange in the nature of nonviolence that the idea of the legal discourse is getting at, but I don't think the close or the analytic structure fit very neatly. Disobedience in the nonviolent tradition was not defended on those grounds as what legal theorists assume. For one, writers in this tradition did not adhere, for the most part, to a moral theory of the state. They did not take the state to be a moral entity, and duties to it could never be moral in any real sense. This was the case, especially true for Thoreau and Gandhi and Tolstoy, maybe less so for King, and there's more open question about that. Secondly, while Gandhi and King did indeed emphasize civility, the civility of disobedience, they did so for reasons different than is normally assumed. Their reasons ranged from the moral, the political, and the strategic. Very few, if any, were made on narrow legal grounds of conforming to legal or constitutional standards or trying to reinforce respect for the law. So in one sense, this is the purpose of my talk today, or one purpose is to detail these broader sets of reasons to detail these broader sets of reasons for arguing for civility of disobedience. And I do that by delineating Gandhi's theory of civil disobedience. And I do so by way of a historical and conceptual analysis of why and how Gandhi introduced civility into the theory and practice of nonviolent disobedience. To frame it that way is partially to say that the emphasis on civility in disobedience was new, and it was something that I think one can subscribe to Gandhi's intervention. It marked a significant departure from Thoreau's understanding, in which I think very broadly the term civil was designated the object of resistance. The original title of Thoreau's article was Resistance to Civil Government, and not its character or its as a form of comportment. So to anticipate some of my conclusions, I'm very interested in this transition from Thoreau to Gandhi. Some people recently, Russell Hansen has called it the domestication of Henry David Thoreau. I think I'll come back to that argument, but I think what I'm more interested in is what happens to the theory and practice of civil disobedience when Gandhi appropriates and incorporates that language of civility into the theory of satyagraha. So Gandhi incorporates Thoreau very soon after the invention of satyagraha in 1906, and Thoreau becomes a part of the Gandhian pantheon and a continual referent throughout his life. But it's really only in 1919 and 1920, in the first mass satyagraha in India, that Gandhi's theory of civil disobedience comes into its own. And it's precisely because Gandhi starts to emphasize civility as a characteristic of the practice of disobedience, of how you do disobedience. And this is, I think, the legacy that we still live in, and it's certainly one that is picked up very directly in Martin Luther King's theory and practice. So against the contemporary critics, I want to suggest that before we jump straight into a defense of uncivil disobedience, we might want to first get a better sense of why the move was made in the first place, and that despite the changing circumstances, some of the reasons might still pertain, that there might be good reasons why we can't give up on civility. However, we might still want to normatively want to defend and maybe even encourage a broader range of practices of dissent. Okay, so civil disobedience and the invention of satyagraha. So I think, for me, one of the remarkable features of the invention of satyagraha or more generally, how Gandhi theorized was that he often inaugurated a practice before he knows what to call it. So the moment of invention of Satyagraha is very clear in Gandhi's mind. It was September 11th, 1906, in the Empire Theatre in Johannesburg, where 3,000 Indian residents in South Africa vowed to resist a new alien registration regime, clearly meant to disempower and harass them and stem ongoing immigration. Gandhi had introduced at that meeting the motion about refusing to register at the risk of punishment. But as his co-organizers began emphasizing the religious nature of taking the vow to resist registration, Gandhi says he experienced a kind of epiphany. It's not the only one in his life. It's often the key moments of political innovation. So, and it was in that moment where he experienced a kind of epiphany, and he could see a new political method coming together before his eyes. So what did he mean by an epiphany? I think was that two branches of his public life collided together, and they were coming together anew around this new form of political action. So since his arrival in South Africa, which was in 1893, Gandhi had become a leading activist for Indian rights and used all of the skills of a good liberal activist on behalf. So petitions, meetings, etc. So on the one side of his public life was this burgeoning liberal politician, community leader, activist. The other side of his public persona was as a moral and spiritual reformer. So since his student days in London, he had allied himself with a distinctive strand of late Victorian radicalism and dissent, one that associated itself with vegetarianism, nonconformist religion, critics of industrial society, socialists, anti-imperialists. The figurehead became Tolstoy. Tolstoy was the galvanizing spirit and prophet of this Victorian radicalism, I think. So the epiphany in this moment was that these two worlds, Gandhi's social and moral world and political world, came together to produce this new political method. And once the campaign against this Registration Act in the Transvaal began in earnest, Gandhi started elaborating the terms of this new method, which he'll eventually start to call Satyagraha. As I think primarily, initially, Gandhi appeared as a Tolstoyan. His initial characterization of Satyagraha was as a form of non-resistance or passive resistance. He was never satisfied with that, so because it conveyed too much, both those terms conveyed too much passivity or withdrawal, whereas Gandhi thought that what was so exhilarating and new about this form of resistance he was inaugurating was that it, like the Johannesburg Mini, it was a collective choice to actively court jail going as a political method. So he thought this was truly novel and needed a new name. This is when he first reads Thoreau's essay on civil disobedience. I think you can see it in biographical evidence of when he reads the text, but it's also clear in the textual evidence. It's only after this point that Gandhi uses the term civil disobedience in his writing. And he also there's a very clear moment when he translates and excerpts Thoreau's essay and publishes it in his journal, Indian Opinion. And this all happens in the aftermath of the first campaign. In this moment, Gandhi also asks his readers of Indian Opinion to submit Indian language terms for the term passive resistance and civil disobedience, and that's when he arrives at Satyagraha, which initially he defines as firmness in a good cause. So this is the sort of crux of when Satyagraha is invented and civil disobedience, very on its heels, is taken up as a term. And I say in some ways, the intellectual origins of Satyagraha very generally has always posed a puzzle for interpreters. There's always a question of to what extent Gandhi was indebted to these previous practices and ideas, or how original he was. So, and of course, the two main contenders were always Tolstoy's theory of non-resistance and Thoreau's theory of civil disobedience. And Gandhi, of course, throughout his life would speak of Thoreau and Tolstoy as his great teachers. But as we've seen in the case of Thoreau, Gandhi did not derive Satyagraha from Thoreau, having only read the essay after starting the campaign. Tolstoy's influence was more substantial, but I think Gandhi scholars on the whole tend not to emphasize either. They tend to think of Gandhi as more original, and in some sense emphasize his Indian roots, or roots in Indian philosophy, as a way, I think, to emphasize originality. So despite the repeated references to Thoreau and Thoreau and Tolstoy as his teachers, many would argue that Gandhi refers to these names just to justify his move, his own ideas, to make his views more persuasive, to give them a kind of authority. In fact, Albert Einstein once was asked what he thought about the relationship between Thoreau and Gandhi. And I think this is a kind of, and Einstein's response is quite a common instinctive response that Gandhi scholars often have, which is that what Einstein said was, Gandhi would have been Gandhi even without Thoreau and Tolstoy. Now, so I think there are a lot of interesting questions about origins of Satyagraha, and it's not easy, partially because Gandhi himself was an autodidact and proselytizer. His mode of reading tended towards assimilation. And he, again, instinctively innovated practically and then amalgamated and deepened and elaborated those ideas. But I do think in this case, as I say, it's clear that Tolstoy is the more long-standing, important, and had a personal relationship with Gandhi. They famously corresponded. Gandhi introduces himself as a follower of Tolstoy. And again, indeed, Satyagraha was first introduced as a species of Tolstoyan resistance. But even there, Gandhi very early on knew he was innovating. Unlike Tolstoy, who had a more dispersed model of non-cooperation, really, though that's not technically the term he would use, Gandhi knew he was using more coordinated mass politics. That was always the case with Satyagraha, rather than a dispersed individual model, which was more Tolstoy's. As I said, with Thoreau, there's no derivation as such, but once Gandhi read Thoreau, he immediately started using the term civil disobedience and citing Thoreau as its great expert practitioner. Again, he republishes a Gujarati translation of in Gandhi's form. It's a didactic reinterpretation, and with excerpts from Civil Disobedience, he immediately starts publishing this as a pamphlet. And I think you can see why Thoreau becomes important, because civil disobedience is in a way more refined, or we might say it's more accurate to what Gandhi was doing, as opposed to Tolstoyan non-resistance, which was really more like non-cooperation, what would become more like non-cooperation, not participating, not paying taxes, withdrawing from various kinds of practices. So, and I said, so Gandhi's understanding of the first innovation is Satyagraha begins as a kind of mass law-breaking, as a purposeful strategy of disruption. And so Thoreau made more sense as an immediate touchstone. And Gandhi also especially liked Thoreau's account, the centerpiece of the resistance to civil government of Thoreau's account of being in jail, which Gandhi would exaggerate further the idea of the just man being in jail, or the most dangerous man being in jail. So, and initially Gandhi did generally think of civil as some sort of equivalent to passive in some sense, or a civility. But in those early in those early campaigns, he really didn't emphasize or give much substance to what civility meant in disobedience. But before turning to what I think Gandhi introduces in the later campaigns in 1919, that's when he really takes up the whole language of civility. I'm going to just come back to this question about whether Thoreau had what was proffered in Thoreau's use of the idea of civil disobedience. As I said, Russell Hanson, in a recent Cambridge Companion to Civil Disobedience, has argued that Gandhi contributed to the pacification of civil disobedience, that in his view, the selective borrowing both, in Gandhi's selective borrowing of both the essay and Thoreau, they were made to conform to the dictates of nonviolence. In some ways, I think this is undoubtedly true. Gandhi himself said that he was aware that Thoreau was not, this is a quote, Thoreau was not perhaps an out-and-out champion of nonviolence. So Gandhi said he knew that, but he did very purposely associate civil with a certain kind of a practice of disobedience, which he initially called truthful, passive as in passive resistance, and nonviolent. Prior to Gandhi, the meaning of the term civil, I think more than it, but I think it was less purposeful than Hanson suggests. I think even prior to Gandhi, the meaning of the term civil had already begun to shift, in part due to the republication of Resistance to Civil Government. Thoreau's original title was republished in 1866 as Civil Disobedience. Hanson thinks this was like the editors were doing something, but there's also evidence that Thoreau approved of this shorter title. I think Gandhi. And I think there is something that over time it became commonplace because of this republication this retooling of the essay as civil disobedience. Over time, there was a kind of shift away from using the term civil to be about characterizing the type of disobedience rather than the target of resistance. As I said, that was the initial term. Civil was just another term to talk about resistance to the state and its laws. And Gandhi, I think, Gandhi would further finesse this ambiguity. And part of the reason is also that Thoreau's essay, Civil Disobedience, that translation gets picked up in the Tolstoyan literature. So that's also how Gandhi reads it. So there is a different context that's already reshaping how you receive that text. And Gandhi would add to this. He would finesse this ambiguity, and that's where I'm going to say more about it. He elaborated a novel account of civility. So it's not just civil, but he emphasizes civility as a necessary feature of nonviolent disobedience. This remolding takes shape during the mass campaigns, and again, I think it's part of the legacy of our contemporary usage. But I think Hansen and Thoreau scholars are right to say that whether civility is associated with nonviolent demeanor or more recently fidelity to the law, that kind of focus is notably absent from Thoreau's original reflections. And as many of you know, Thoreau advocated more, we might call violent forms of disobedience and more disruptive. So there was never, civility wasn't a key feature, I think, in Thoreau's account of disobedience. And that partially is to emphasize the sense, to highlight again the sense of how new that language of civility was, and how Gandhi was the key figure who added this new kind of definition. Okay, so Gandhi returns to India in 1915, and within 4 very short years, he finds an opportunity to try out mass disobedience. The first time, as he says, mass satyagraha and mass disobedience against the extension of wartime. The opportunity happened in 1919 against the extension of wartime emergency powers, known as collectively as the Rowlatt Acts. So this, along with the extensive non-cooperation movement, which started in the aftermath of this campaign, provided this opportunity for Gandhi to test and refine the theory and practice of satyagraha, and especially in its civil disobedience, or the dimension of civil disobedience. I think today we tend to use the term civil disobedience very loosely. I can come back to that in discussion. We sometimes just use it to mean mass protest or demonstrations of dissent. But for Gandhi, and I think for King, we'll see there's a little bit of a transition. It was very specific. It was about breaking the law, and Gandhi was thinking through the nuances of what staging law breaking does as a political tool. So when attempting to launch his first mass civil disobedience campaign, he faced a very interesting practical conundrum. So he was trying to test or disobey sedition laws, but of course sedition laws were quite extreme, or they were, it was a real question of how do you disobey sedition laws when they were about pretty violent or extreme activities. And so so he decided to focus on, in a way, trying to find a way to find the most absurd or the silliest of the terms of sedition. And the one thing he found was he could publish tracts that had been banned under the sedition law. And of course, many of them were his own, so all of his own writings at that point, from Hind Swaraj and early pamphlets, had been officially banned. And so he published these illegal tracts, including his translation of Plato's Apology, which is a kind of irony, of course. So the main problem, so again, the problem was, how do you disobey Rowlatt Acts since they require sedition? And the 4 books that, so he circulated Hind Swaraj, his translation of Plato's Apology, Thoreau, and his translation of Thoreau's Essay on Civil Disobedience, and an unregistered newspaper. So I think there is something ironic, of course, that the translation of the Apology was banned, and it was banned throughout until independence. But I also think there is something interesting there is something, of course, very self-reflexive and meta, we might say, that Gandhi publishes Thoreau's essay, The Duty of Civil Disobedience, as an act of disobedience. And I'll come back to it, because I do think in Gandhi you see this kind of self-reflexive staging is a key part of the civility or the structure of nonviolent protest and its formality. Okay, so also at this time, Gandhi is developing what he calls the science of satyagraha. He's sort of differentiating forms of satyagraha. main species or the branches of the tree that he emphasizes are civil disobedience, non-cooperation, and constructive satyagraha. And again, up to this point, civil disobedience is mainly what he had done. He'll move into non-cooperation soon after. And I think here he also starts differentiating some things that still are ambiguous in the theory and practice of civil disobedience, which is the ambiguity between contesting an unjust law and contesting an unjust system through the practice of civil disobedience. Gandhi starts using a distinction between what he calls defensive and aggressive civil disobedience. The Rowlatt Acts, according to Gandhi, were the kind of laws that demanded what he called defensive disobedience. Defensive disobedience was akin to what he called self-defense. It was necessary and automatic. It was a necessary and automatic response to laws that violate fundamental moral and political principles. In South Africa, the Asiatic Acts were examples of what he called degrading laws that, quote, no self-respecting Indian could accept. Likewise, in the case of the Rowlatt Acts, government restrictions on civil liberty were equally degrading. With respect to those laws, everyone had not just a right of disobedience, but a moral duty to disobey. To accept them was nothing less than slavery. So that's defensive or automatic or civil disobedience and self-defense. Aggressive civil disobedience was when you contest a law as a way to question a regime, its authority to issue laws. For example, non-payment of taxes during non-cooperation. So on the one hand, what you call aggressive civil disobedience is that you're making a judgment about the system as a whole. It's also so he would say an example of taxes. Taxation in principle isn't immoral, not in Gandhi's language. Tolstoy may have disagreed, but for Gandhi, taxation isn't immoral. A just regime could tax. There's nothing wrong in principle with taxation, but to say that you're not going to pay taxes in this regard was a judgment of the system as a whole, a condemnation of the system as a whole, and it's taken sometimes he says you're aggressive is also voluntary. You're taking on this to make a point. And non-cooperation and the salt satyagraha later would in a way involve both aggressive and defensive, and often defensive would shade into more aggressive forms of civil disobedience, and eventually something he would call total disobedience or purna, a kind of total disobedience of the regime and all its laws. I just as a side note, one of the things that Gandhi was differentiating here was that non-cooperation, which he starts practicing, he would say is not civil disobedience because it involves it's less aggressive. You're not technically breaking any laws. You're often just withdrawing, say, from government schools, boycotting courts, etc. So technically, in its early phases, non-cooperation phase is innocent. It's not illegal, and it can be practiced by everyone, including school children. And it's really the later stages where the two come together. And the last stage of non-cooperation was always non-payment of taxes, or at its very limit, mutiny of some kind. But the most important innovation Gandhi makes in this early campaign, both in Rowlatt and leading to non-cooperation, is the introduction of the language of civility. And I want to just say why he introduced the language of civility in these campaigns. I think we often forget, that both these campaigns ended rather dramatically and as partial failures, in the sense that they both were effectively called off by Gandhi when they were implicated in incidents of violence. Gandhi did not think they were total failures. He thought both campaigns, especially non-cooperation, taught ordinary people to overcome fear of imperial authority and regain what he called their inherent power to contest oppression. But he did think that they were failures as nonviolent campaigns. They led to outbreaks of violence, and he again suspended them. Technically, he often just suspended, especially in non-cooperation, the aggressive civil disobedience component of the campaign. And he did that to reassess why nonviolent campaigns or satyagraha had led to violence. And he famously referred to these series of missteps of his early campaigns as his Himalayan miscalculations. And I think in diagnosing the end of both campaigns, that's when Gandhi started to map out, remodel nonviolent action, and try to correct for these inner tendencies towards violence. And that's what civility was an answer to that problem, the problem of violence. So I'll just describe the violence, because obviously violence is a very loaded term, and it's used by, kind of euphemistically used both by in colonial official reports and newspapers and critics. So in Bombay and Ahmedabad, during the Rowlatt campaign, riots ensued upon rumors of Gandhi's arrest. He was on his way to Punjab and turned back. Rioting here meant demonstrations which overflowed into attacks on persons and property, and sometimes more organized acts of sabotage and provocation, train derailments, attacks on police, government property, and government personnel or people who were deemed cooperators. So Rowlatt was really about these acts of intimidation. Non-cooperation during non-cooperation as well, loyalists or cooperators were attacked, but the most famous incidents took place at Chari Chora, which is a small station in what was then United Provinces, where 23 policemen who had fired on demonstrators were chased into a police office, and that was set on fire, and those policemen were killed. That ended the non-cooperation movement. But there were also other incidents that Gandhi was critical of, which is social boycott or extreme ostracism of people who were not participating. So in response to both these events, Gandhi began to emphasize and elaborate a theory of civility, and especially right after the Rowlatt disturbances. And that's when he first starts distinguishing, first way of defining civility, he distinguishes between civil and criminal disobedience or uncivil disobedience. So criminal disobedience, he argues, is thoughtless, uncivil, devoid of truth. It involved physical intimidation and violence to persons and property. Its opposite was civility, which meant not just refraining from violence, but a form of enacting violence, so it's a way of performing acts of disobedience or resistance to project the right meaning. So they had to perform civility. So I'll come back to what that content is. And initially, again, the way conceptually he differentiates, a civil disobedient distinguishes their actions from an anarchist, on the one hand, who denies the legitimacy of law as such, and the criminal, who defies the law when it is in their self-interest to do so. And this is also when Gandhi starts arguing that only someone who is known as a habitual follower of the law could be an effective disobedient. Now, I'm going to say two more things just before I get to the content of civility or what it looks like. I'm going to circle back. This is more of a kind of background view, I think, of how Gandhi diagnoses the problem of violence to which civility is the answer. In Hind Swaraj, which was a text he writes 10 years before the Rowlatt campaigns, Gandhi it was the first time he really had a critique of violence, and it was really focused on an argument against advocates of terrorism, or really specifically targeted assassination or kind of propaganda of the deed kind of violence. And his response, of course, was that kind of violence he thought was really a product of an allure of modern civilization, something that the Western educated elite were captivated by. So initially, he really thought of that kind of violence as an elite pathology, driven by a desire for power and a certain psychological traits that undergirded the turn to political violence, attempts at mastery, worries about frustration, a desire for power. But here I think you really have this new problem, violence that emerges from within the dynamics of mass action. And this is the new problem that Gandhi has to deal with in this entire decade. And I think that's part of the reason why it's the most creative decade in thinking and theorizing Satyagraha. And here he has to think of a number of different ways in which, and what he thought was happening was partially that many people were misunderstanding the logic of Satyagraha, confusing the idea of organized, purposeful provocation or intimidation with what he thought of as disciplined action. So he thought the problem was that you were mixing these two modes, and everyone was quite open that you could mix these modes, a sort of more violent form and a non-violent form. And I think in Chari Chara, he also thought something also new was happening, which is that there was, whereas before there's problems of frustration that might lead to action, but here you really had a kind of sense of collective power or mastery. So Gandhi thought what he saw at Chari Chara was the kind of overflowing of the success of non-cooperation was that as Indians, as he said, overcame slavery, they began to revel in a newly found collective power, and they were too easily tempted to dominate or intimidate others they saw as weaker to them, and in this case, weaker in numbers. So civility was one language and a concept to mitigate these hazards of action or these forms of violence. Okay, so I have about 10 minutes. So I'm going to just end here to really focus, which was hopefully the crux I was trying to get to. So I think to really understand the purpose of civility, why Gandhi introduced it into the logic of nonviolent protest, the most interesting part is the how of civility, what it looked like in practice. So, and I think, again, Gandhi was most inventive, I think, in innovations in practice, in some ways, to match these conceptual distinctions that he also elaborated. So I've talked a lot about the why of civility. So again, I think the hard and interesting question is, what is civility in practice? How do you convey to a public, to the public audience, to supporters and opponents? How do you convey that you are, in Gandhi's language, what you're doing in civility is you're conveying that you're neither a criminal, nor an anarchist, nor a simple disturber of the political order. And I think his answer was really about giving form and formality to the structure of nonviolent protest, especially in its exemplary discipline and organization. This is what often is Gandhi gives a lot of rules and maxims about how nonviolent protest should be done. And I think this is where you see the clue to civility in practice. And I think I'm going to broadly say there's three groupings to understand how this is performed is displays of non-coercion, displays of self-rule, and displays of self-sacrifice. Non-coercion I think of as kind of the basic moral heart of it, whereas you never intimidate, and Gandhi was very specific, it's really physical intimidation that he was very clear that you don't do of opponents or potential allies. Self-ruling is, I'll say what looks like self-ruling, but self-rule, to show yourself as self-ruling actors is really to differentiate yourself from the anarchist of some kind. And self-sacrifice, I think, is to differentiate yourself from the criminal or from an egoistic actor. So non-coercion, Gandhi devised all these rules about for specific acts like pickets, boycotts, hartals, so they would avoid all appearance of coercion and intimidation. And you were balancing disruption with constraint. I think partially that's the key to making the message clearer. But some of what you would do in terms of comportment was he emphasized silence often. And in general, Gandhi had this view that your actions spoke louder than words. So silence was very important. It displayed thoughtfulness. He would say the deeds showed commitment, whereas speech was distracting or energizing in certain ways. So you stage this message. So in general, during non-cooperation movement, when you have pickets, you never physically stop picket crossers. In the boycott of schools, there were students who wanted to lie down across the entrances to schools. He said that's a kind of physical intimidation that's unnecessary, especially in the most controversial or things like school boycotts. Again, he was against ostracism or social boycott, the idea of not giving essential services to people who might be not part of the protest. This had a legacy of caste boycott or caste excommunication as well. And in conditions of confrontation, Gandhi would say, there is something important about protecting opponents, potentially vulnerable opponents. And he had the case he would always say is, when, say, that there's a mass crowd and there's one or two English policemen, it would actually be more, to injure that policeman doesn't show nonviolence or doesn't show any restraint or doesn't do any performative sense of what kind of resistance you're engaging with. It's just an easy act of violence because you've outnumbered them. It's not a show of strength, of nonviolent strength. Again, he also said fasting, for example, you never fast against an opponent, only those against your closest allies. It only would feel morally coercive on those opponents. Self-rule, I think this is probably the more interesting one. So Gandhi always talked about taking solemn vows, the Satyagraha vow. And I think the vows were really ways of showing that you're following your own rules, was a kind of self-rule. Again, to show that the Indian protesters were self-ruling lawmakers, not lawbreakers, which is what they were accused of being by the government and their opponents. Campaigns in general for Gandhi had to be they had to have planned escalation, stages that were outlined in advance and adhered to. You make public your set of demands and you're careful not to adjust them haphazardly. So again, following your own rules is a part of this kind of constraint. And generally, I think that the sense is that there's a thoughtful, controlled way to demonstrate nonviolent power or strength, and to show the capacity to fulfill your own rules of organization is showing your capacity for swaraj or self-rule. Self-sacrifice is partially about accepting the burdens of protest, so showing a willingness to take on risks. The usual language, I think you're familiar with, you break a law and willingly and quietly, Gandhi would say smilingly accept punishment. So it's in that's a kind of non-egoism, a sacrifice and suffering that shows that what you're protesting for is about something greater than just your own self-interest. And so he thought this was the lesson, or this was especially what elites in India needed to show, is their capacity and interest in sacrifice, that they were not trying to get power just for themselves. He had a couple of interesting examples too. He said, non-payment of rent, for example, many people have an interest in not paying rent. It's a very burdensome thing, especially for the poor. But you have to, when you do it as an act of nonviolent resistance, it has to look like something that's not just about your own interest, but about principle. And that's partially that you only undertake it knowing the risks. And it's only when it's risky that it shows that you're doing something beyond ego. So there is a lot of, in general, in the way I think we talk about nonviolence, we often hear the kind of commonplace view that nonviolence tries to take the higher moral plane in a political dispute. Now, I think the interesting thing, I think that I think that's, some of that is accurate, some of it's, I think, too narrow, but I think if it does that, it does it through these practices of non-egoism or through a particular form of protest. And it's not by rhetoric or refraining from violence that, in fact, you have a structure in which you take the higher plane as such. It really matters how it's performed. I have one last example, which I think I've always found the most interesting, is Gandhi's campaigns in India often started with this reinvention of the idea of a hartal, or a day-long work stoppage. Traditionally, hartal was a kind of day of mourning, which Gandhi had basically through these campaigns had redefined as often the starting moment of any campaign. The Rowlatt Satyagraha, it starts National Week. Annually, it would be a kind of organized day of mourning or hartal or work stoppage across the country. And Gandhi's rule of what makes a hartal a nonviolent hartal is that you announce it in advance and you refrain from pursuing compliance on the day itself. So the true Satyagrahi, he would say, would protect the shops that chose not to comply, and a total hartal of 100% compliance would actually implies coercion. So he would say you should be the best demonstration of a voluntary character of a hartal, or a matter of pride from a Satyagraha standpoint, would be if some shops stayed open, something like 80 or 90%. And if it was a true Satyagraha, he would in fact go further and protect those shops that chose not to comply. And in that way, you dramatize the voluntary nature of the protest, as well as restraint in not intimidating dissenters. And that would say that the movement demonstrated confidence and strength in its cause. And tactically, by showing civility toward dissenters, it leaves open the door to their potential conversion, or more generally draws more public sympathy than Gandhi thought, than coerced compliance. So the more provocative a tactic, the more exacting these rules that Gandhi would say to mitigate that provocation. The larger the crowd, the more silently or slowly it moved. And I think for me, the crucial point is these kind of rules and distinctions are not primarily, I think, or only moral, or trying to give a kind of legal criteria of the legitimacy of certain types of protests, but in fact, they were political, tactical, strategic maxims about the message you communicate through protest and how that message can be heard, and ultimately its capacity to move, disrupt, and persuade the public. So, and these, I think, so civility as a part of these rules of performance are internally, they were really, these forms as you practice it were meant to mitigate internally, the activists themselves, a certain moral psychology or temptations around anger and frustration that might lead to incidents of violence. And on the other hand, it also meant to offset or mitigate the resentments built up in opponents that can also lead to polarization and escalation. And that's what these rules matter. Okay, so I'm gonna conclude on, so externally, yes. So I think part of the reason that the practice of civility matters in Gandhi is I think Gandhi and nonviolence, and I think to some extent King, and I think it's an element that's been lost in the way we think about nonviolence. There's a lot of moral psychology in nonviolence. There are a lot of assumptions about the affective dimensions of politics, about resentment, mitigation. Gandhi famously said, "You pierce the heart. You pierce the heart, not mind, to unsettle prejudices and opinions," and that's what Satyagraha is trying to appeal. It's through these acts that you're trying to perform and transform. Okay, so a couple of concluding thoughts. So I guess in my account, I want to say Gandhi is the one that introduces this connotation of civility. It's picked up by Martin Luther King and enters, I think, our contemporary landscape in that way. It was not Thoreau. And it is loosely associated with civil and peaceful protest. But I want to insist in a way that civility is not about refraining from provocation, but it's that provocation has to be encased in a staging of civility, discipline, dignity, or something like that. Sensibility, again, as I want to say, it's a particular way to perform protest for specific purposes, which in Gandhi's it's to give protest a more laser-like effect. Here, I think, is also a way to emphasize what I think is essential for this tradition of nonviolent protest is formality. King actually gave it a name that Gandhi didn't, but I think it picks up on it. King called it dramatization. He was picking that up from a theorist, an early theorist of nonviolence, Krishnalal Sridharani. And to dramatize is that, so civility is performed and staged. And I think more generally, Gandhi thought mass action had to be given a form. It had to be given a form, otherwise it was dangerous and it could exceed it could easily spill over into acts of violence. And so in general, I think nonviolent resistance and satyagraha is always a kind of balancing act between disruption and discipline or constraint, and that the fact of disruption has, you constrain it or civilize it in order to make this point. So I think the last point I want to maybe end on is that I think even though I think, even if we might want to champion more openly uncivil forms of disobedience, I think one question to ask is how, when we think of the moral defense of uncivil forms of protest is something I think Gandhi and King would agree with. The question they were asking is about the semiotics of protest in terms of what makes effective protest in terms of messaging and reaching its audience. So I think instead of just defending uncivil forms, there really has to be more thinking about what we think actually works through what does uncivility do that civil protest can't do. What kind of moral psychology are we assuming political movements affect in the public, or the whole question of how people read a protest. Now I think Gandhi and King, again, this is just and this I'll conclude on, Gandhi and King did not, I think, avoid violence primarily because it was a moral wrong. If that was their main goal, they would have written much more on that point. And in fact, in many ways, they accept that there are good moral reasons to choose violence. They actually were never a pure pacifist in that way. But they did believe that violence could never be a policy. And they were interested in showing why violence was futile as a political method. And yet why it might still be tempted to employ it. So I think that's, again, the importance of why and how Gandhi introduced civility, not as a litmus test for legitimacy or to lend moral legitimacy to the practice of protest, but really to make nonviolent protest for the force and purpose of its disruptive intent visible and sharp. So I'll end there, and I'm sorry I went longer than I had planned.
So I will end the Ashtanga yoga practice with the closing mantra on that note. And after the mantra, we'll be changing gears, shifting up, so to speak, with some more intense music and doing the high intensity interval training body weight workout, focusing on kickboxing today. So I'll go ahead and close with the closing mantra, which means blessings to those that lead with compassion. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. Peace, peace, perfect peace. Om Swasti Prajabhyaha Palipalayamtam Nayena Margena Mahimahisha Go Ramnebhyaha Palipala Shumamatsu Nityam Lokaha Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So I'm going to pick up this yoga mat and this cat, and we are going to jump into the workout here in just a minute. I'm going to check the time, check out these comments. Please like, share, and subscribe, and consider donating so that I can pay the rent until I find a job. But this live stream will always be free. I'm just trying to get to the end of the month because DoorDash and Uber Eats deactivated me based on my previous activism, which you could say that I intentionally created a inflammatory Facebook post in order to avoid greater violence in the future. So when I made that Facebook post, I was raided by an FBI SWAT team, but the end result was that they did not do another violent coup at the Florida Capitol like they said they were going to, because I said me and my friends would defend that Capitol. And as a result, I now have one felony criminal record, and DoorDash and Uber Eats did a background check, and they kicked me off of the platform, even though I've been working for them for a year and a half with the same one felony criminal record since I started. And I haven't done anything, illegal since then. But suddenly, after 2 previous background checks, this one criminal record is now a problem. So I'm still looking for work as of yesterday, and I'll be out holding a laid off veteran sign on the corner, maybe selling some leftover roses from Valentine's Day. And in the meantime, I do my daily routine of meditation, yoga, and martial arts. So I'm going to start the music. I'm going to take a quick bathroom break. I recommend you have some pre-workout or coffee or strong tea or whatever you like, and listen to the music, get pumped up, and get ready to work out. What we're going to do is we're going to do this right here. If you want to take a screenshot and follow along or write it out on a notebook for yourself, there's 8 exercises. We're going to do a full body burpee, then squats, then push-ups, then sit-ups. Then we're going to do kickboxing, then kicks, then boxing, then head movement with high knees for the full body, legs, upper body, and core over and over again. And then I left a space here so I can check off each round I've completed so that I make sure that I'm not skipping a body part and I'm sticking to the whole routine. And I'm going to try to use a stopwatch here in a minute. So I recommend that you follow along, and if you stick with the whole routine, you have my respect for doing the meditation, the yoga, and the martial arts, because that'll make you a very well-rounded person.
How to stop the laziness and how to stop the procrastination. They have some idea in their head, some kind of a vision of what they want to do, but they don't know where to start. And so they say, hey, where do I start? And when's the best time to start? Where do I start? And when's the best time to start? Where do I start? And when's the best time to start? And I have a very simple answer for that. Here and now. That's it. You want to improve? You want to get better? You want to get on a workout program or a clean diet? You want to start a business? You want to write a book or make a movie or build a house or a computer or put together some mobile application? Where do we start? You start right here. And when do you start? You start right now. Right now. Right now. You initiate the action aggressively. You want to improve? You want to get better? You want to get on a workout program or a clean diet? You want to start a business? You want to write a book or make a movie or build a house or a computer or put together some mobile application? The idea isn't going to execute itself. And the book isn't going to write itself. And the weights out in the gym, they're not going to move themselves. You have to do it. And you have to do it now. And that means you gotta stop thinking about it and stop dreaming about it and stop researching every aspect of it and reading all about it and debating the pros and cons of it.
Okay.
Just start doing it.
First round, full body burpee.
You wanna get better?
Begin.
You wanna get on a workout program or a clean diet? You wanna start a business? You wanna write a book or make a movie or build a house or a computer or put together some mobile application? You want to improve? You want to get better? Go. You want to improve? You want to get better? Take that
Full
first
body
step
burpee.
and make it happen.
Next is squats.
Get after it. Get after it. Here and now.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear.
Alright. Next is push-ups.
I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone
Oops,
past, I
just
will turn
push-ups.
the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me.
Next is sit-ups.
And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain.
Kickboxing.
What's in the box?
Cross jab. Cross. Lock. Kick.
What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. leg to escape a trap? That's an animal kind of trick. A human would remain in the trap, endure the pain, feigning death that he might kill the trapper and remove a threat to his kind. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? To determine if you're human, be silent. It burns. Silence. His world emptied of everything except the hand immersed in agony. He thought he could feel skin curling black on that agonized hand. The flesh dropping away until only charred bones remained. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box?
Core, head movement, and high knees.
What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. It stopped, as though a switch had been turned off. The pain stopped. Enough. Take your hand from the box, young human, and look at it. Do it, do it. He jerked his hand from the box, stared at it astonished.
Full body burn.
Not a mark. No sign of agony on the flesh. He held up the hand, turned
So
it,
this is round 2.
flexed the fingers. Pain, she sniffed. A human can override any nerve in the body. Ever sift sand through a screen? We Bene Gesserit sift people to find the humans. Paul felt that he had been infected with terrible purpose. He did not know yet what the terrible purpose was.
That's it. Next is squats.
Why do you test for humans? To set you free. To set you free. Free? Once, men turned their thinking over to machines in the hopes that this would set them free. That only permitted other men with machines to enslave them. Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind.
Next is sit-ups.
Deep in the human unconscious is a pervasive need for a logical universe that makes sense. Sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. But the real universe is always one step beyond logic. One step beyond logic. One step beyond logic.
Kickboxing. We're going to do cross jab cross. Inside
There
out
is
block
in all
cross
things
kick.
a pattern that is part of our universe. It has symmetry, elegance, and grace. Those qualities you find always in that which the true artist captures. That which the true artist captures. You can find it in the turning of the seasons. That which the true artist captures. In the way sand traits along a ridge. In the branch clusters of the creosote
Kicks.
bush, or the pattern of its leaves. We try to copy these patterns in our lives, in our society, seeking the rhythms, the dances, the forms that comfort. There is in all things a pattern that is part of our universe.
Boxing.
It has symmetry, elegance, and grace. Those qualities you find always in that which the true artist captures. That which the true artist captures. You can find it in the turning of the seasons. That which the true artist captures. Yet, it is impossible to see peril in the finding of ultimate perfection. Ultimate perfection. Ultimate perfection. Peril in the finding. It is clear that the ultimate pattern contains its own
Head
fixity.
movement.
In such perfection, all things move towards death. There is in all things a pattern that is part of our universe. It has symmetry, elegance, and grace. Those qualities you find always in that which the true artist captures. That which the true artist captures. You can find it in the turning of the seasons.
Nobody hurt me.
That which the true
So
artist
this is round
captures.
3.
The world is supported by 4 things. The learning of the wise, the justice of the great, the prayers of the righteous, and the valor of the brave. But all of these things are as nothing without a ruler who knows the art of ruling. Make that the science of your tradition. All life is in service.
Squats.
Akira. He's got clout.
But no, it's like commitment, man. It's like life is hard, right? Like, yeah, you might get hurt. It's like, you know, your heart might get broken. You know?
Push-ups.
It's like you might lose your job, but you still gotta commit. You know? And you gotta commit, right? You know what I mean? And you gotta commit, right? You know what I mean? And you gotta commit, right? You know what I mean? Don't hesitate. Go. Commit. You gotta commit. You know, don't hesitate. Go. Commit. You gotta commit. And it's like, you know, you meet somebody and, hey, you know, you like her and she likes you, and you're hesitating. Don't hesitate. Go. Commit. You gotta commit. You know, commit. You gotta commit. You know, commit. You gotta commit. You know, commit. Don't hesitate. Go. Commit. You gotta commit. You know, don't hesitate. Go. Commit. You gotta commit. Don't hesitate. Go. Commit. You gotta commit. You know, don't hesitate. Go. Commit. You gotta commit. You know, might get hurt.
Kicks.
You might lose something, but it's like you can't experience the joy that is intended for you in life if you don't go. You gotta go, man. Don't hesitate. Go. Commit. You gotta commit. You know, don't hesitate. Go. Commit. You gotta commit. You know.
Just 30 seconds each. High knees. Head movement. And switch. That's round 3.
How do I deal with setbacks, failures,
Whole
delays,
body.
or other disasters?
I actually have a fairly simple way of dealing with these situations. It is actually one word to deal with all those situations. And that is good. And this is actually something that one of my guys that worked for me pointed out to me. He would call me up or pull me aside with some major problem, some issue that was going on. And he'd say, boss, we got this and that and the other thing. And I'd look at him and I'd say, good. One day he was telling me about some issue that he was having. He said, I already know what you're going to say. And I said, well, what am I going to say? He said, you're going to say good. 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 Good.
Push-ups.
You're going to say good. You're going to say good. You're going to say good. Good. That's what you always say. When something is wrong and going bad, you always just look at me and say, good. Good. And I said, well, yeah.
Sit-ups.
And I mean it. And that is how I feel when things are going bad. There's going to be some good that's going to come from it. Oh, mission got canceled? Good. We can focus on another one. Didn't get the new high-speed gear we wanted? Good. We can keep it simple. Didn't get promoted? Good. More time to get better. Didn't get funded? Good. We own more of the company. Didn't get the job you wanted? Good. You can get more experience and build a better resume. You're gonna say good. You're gonna say good.
good movement.
Focus on the good. Focus on the good. Take that issue, take that problem, take that issue, take that problem, make it something good. Make it something good. And bring that attitude to your team. Two, you go forward. You're gonna say good. You're gonna say good. You're gonna say good. You're gonna say good. 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 You're gonna say good. You're gonna say good. Good. You're gonna say good. Good. And lastly, like to close this
Full
out,
body burpee. This is
if you
round
can say
5.
the word good, guess what? It means you're still alive. It means you're still breathing. And if you're still breathing, well then hell, you still got some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, go out on the attack.
Squats.
And that right there is about as good as it gets. Akira. He's got clout. If you've got a gigantic
Push-ups.
billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say? And why? One of my kind of, I guess my mantra is a very simple one. Discipline equals freedom. Discipline equals freedom. 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 Equals discipline. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom.
Sit-ups.
The answer is discipline. You want more free time? Follow a more disciplined time management system. You want financial freedom? Implement long-term financial discipline in your life. Do you want to be physically free to move how you want? To be freed from many health issues caused by poor lifestyle choices?
Kickboxing
You have
round.
to have the discipline to eat healthy food and consistently work out. We all want freedom. Discipline is the only way to get it. Discipline equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals discipline. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals discipline. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals discipline. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom.
Kicks.
Discipline starts with waking up early. It really does. But that is just the beginning. It is working out every day. It is eating the right foods to fuel your system correctly. It is disciplining your emotions so you can make good decisions. It is about having the discipline to control your ego so it doesn't get out of hand and control you. It is about treating people the way you would want to be treated. It is about doing the tasks you don't want to do, but you know will help you. Discipline is about facing your fears so you can conquer them. Discipline means taking the hard road, the uphill road, to do what is right for you and for others. Discipline equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals freedom. Equals discipline. allows us to be
and
weak for that moment, to break down another time, to give in to desire and short-term gratification. Discipline will not allow that. Discipline calls for strength and fortitude and will. It won't accept weakness. It won't tolerate a breakdown in will. Discipline can seem like your worst enemy, but in reality, it is your best friend. It will take care of you like nothing else can, and it will put you on the path to strength and health and intelligence and happiness. Most important, discipline will put you on the path to freedom.
Sit-ups.
You know, when people think of the word mind control, they think of controlling other people's minds. And when I think about mind control, I think about controlling your own mind. Because while I am obviously a physical person and I embrace physicality, we are our minds. What it means and where the you actually is, and whether there's a soul or a brain or whatever, or your heart or some other conjured up place. This is what I know. Is that your mind, the thing that is listening and comprehending these words right now, that is you. And that thing, that mind, you can control. You are the machine. Mind control. You are the machine. Mind control. And you can control the machine. Mind control. You have that ability. Mind control. And you're going to do what you want to do. And people ask me, how do I get tougher? Be tougher. They ask me, how can I wake up earlier in the morning? The answer is, wake up earlier in the morning. How can I work out consistently every single day? Work out consistently every single day. How can I stop from eating sugar? Stop eating sugar. What about the emotions? How can I stop missing that girl or that guy or whoever broke up with me? How can I stop missing them?
head movement, and high knees.
Doesn't get a vote. Laziness, they don't get a vote. Sadness, no vote. Frustration, no vote. Negativity, you don't get a vote. I don't even give my temper a vote. So, the next time you're feeling weak, or you're feeling lazy, or you're feeling soft, or you're feeling emotional, tell them that they don't get a vote. Tell them you are declaring martial law on your mind. You're declaring
And that's it.
mind control. And impose
So what
what
we
you
did,
want on your brain. Mind control.
we did
You are the machine.
6 rounds of 8 different exercises in a high intensity interval training format. We did full body exercise, legs, upper body, and core. We did a calisthenics round, full body burpee, squats, push-ups, sit-ups, and we did a technique round where we did kickboxing, kicks, boxing, head movement, and high knees. Right? And yeah, so please like, share, and subscribe. Consider donating because I recently got laid off, so this live stream will be free as long as I can do it forever until the day I die. I want to live stream every day forever so that everybody can have a free resource of meditation, yoga, martial arts to practice at home. And in the meantime, I'm looking for more work, but I recently got deactivated randomly on DoorDash and Uber Eats after a 1.5 years of delivering every day, all day, with no problems. So there's mass deactivations going on right now, and I'm looking for work. So please consider helping me keep up with the bills until I find a new job, and I will keep live streaming so that you can have a daily practice at home. You don't have to depend on any gym, right? But if you're really into the martial arts, yoga, and meditation, I recommend that you either reach out to me or find a teacher in a school in your hometown where you live, somebody that you can train with, because there's no substitute for a good teacher in person when it comes to meditation, yoga, and martial arts. So one more time, please like, share, and subscribe, and consider donating through one of these resources you can see in the comments and the description. And I'll be back tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Thank you, Tati, for moderating.